video is for entertainment purposes only. Wild mushrooms and plants can be harmful or fatal if swallowed.
Hello friends, it's early February here in southern Indiana. A great time to be alive. When else can you experience 20-degree temperatures and snow one week, and the next week 70-degree temperatures and thunderstorms and tornadoes? Exciting times. The snow is melting, the days are getting longer, the sap is flowing in the trees are coming alive, and that means the mushrooms that live collaboratively and symbiotically with the trees will be coming alive. One of the first mushrooms to fruit in the spring is the morel mushroom, and that's a mushroom you can certainly get excited about. We're living in unprecedented times when it comes to our knowledge of the morel mushroom. There have been revolutionary strides made in both cultivation and our scientific understanding of these mushrooms in the genus Morchella. Yes, I said Morchella and not Morchella. That's how most people say it. That's how I've said it in the past, but actually the proper Latin pronunciation of the CH sound is with a hard K, like in lichen and orchid. Our knowledge of morel mushroom taxonomy and the morel mushroom tree of life and how these mushrooms live and work in the world has greatly expanded in recent years thanks to genomics and DNA sequencing, greatly expanding the number of known species. There may be as many as 80 morel mushrooms known in the world now, all occupying their own evolutionary niche. So in light of this new revolutionary understanding of the morel mushroom, let's look at 12 named species of morel mushrooms in the eastern United States and Canada. Many of these are new to science. I'm going to be going from the most rare to the least rare. Here we go. First we have the gray morel, Morchella tomentosa. If you asked your average person here in southern Indiana what types of morels we have here, they would probably say black, gray, and yellow, but the gray morel they would be referring to would just be an immature yellow morel, as they look gray until they release their spores. But that is not this gray morel, Morchella tomentosa, first described in 2008. This one is a fire-associated species found primarily in western North America. It is identified by its post-fire occurrence and its fine hairs on its young fruiting bodies, and it also has a thick double-walled stem. The pits of this mushroom are deep and irregular and covered with a thick layer of fuzz, and its range of color tends to progress from darker to lighter with the age of the fruiting body. Morchella tomentosa is the only morel known to produce a unique underground root-like structure called a radicosclerosum. This differs from all known sclerotia in other morel mushrooms. A sclerotia is a tiny fungal time capsule that can lay dormant for decades, laying in wait for an environmental trigger such as a forest fire or the death of a host tree, and then spring into life and grow and fruit at the appropriate time. Morels are survivors. They've been around for 150 million years, long before flowering plants evolved, living through the extinction event that ended the age of the dinosaurs, and they've endured through all kinds of environmental changes since. This morel broke off from other morels very early in evolutionary history. It is in its own clade and not in the clades of the black morels or the yellow morels. There are 2 research-grade observations for this mushroom in the eastern United States, 1 in Pennsylvania and 1 in New York. All right, let's move on to the next mushroom. Next we have the crooked morel, Morchella prava, new to science since 2012, also sometimes called the contorted morel or the sandy morel due to its preferred habitat. While other yellow morels love lush forests with loamy soils, Morchella prava is a specialist in sandy soil. You will often find it along riverbanks and lake shores or in sandy jack pine barrens. It is often associated with pines, oaks, or birch in sandy northern regions. The cap of Morchella prava is highly irregular and lopsided and can be roughly spherical or squashed in appearance. The ridges are thick and irregular, and like other morels in the yellow morel clade, its color changes from gray to yellow to brown as it matures. This mushroom has 2 research-grade observations in the eastern United States on iNaturalist, 1 in Wisconsin and 1 in Iowa. Next we have the northern black morel, Morchella septentrionalis, also called the northern hardwood morel. This is a morel mushroom in the black morel clade, described as new to science in 2012. It has a northerly eastern North American distribution where it occurs above the 44th parallel. This fungus fruits under hardwood trees, particularly American aspen, ash, and maple trees. It is a small morel mushroom, 1 to 3 inches tall, the smallest of all the species of morel mushrooms in the eastern United States and Canada. The cap of the septentrionalis has vertical ridges. They're very regular and ladder-like, and there is often a defined ridge where the cap meets the stem. Often fruits directly from rotting wood or woody debris. Recent research suggests it may behave more like a saprobe, or a decomposer, than other morels. It might have 2 phases of its life, one where it lives as a symbiont, sharing nutrients with the roots of living trees, and a second phase where it acts as a decomposer, living on organic decaying matter. There are only 2 research-grade observations worldwide for this mushroom on iNaturalist, 1 in Wisconsin and 1 in Vermont. All right, let's move on to the next one. And next we have the rather sneaky and somewhat confusing Cryptic Morel, Morchella ulmaria. You may have noticed that a lot of these morels are new to science since 2012. That is because of the work of 2 teams of mycologists, the American mycologist Michael Quo and his team, and the French mycologist Philippe Clouet and his team, both publishing their groundbreaking work in 2012 after sampling and sequencing the DNA of all kinds of morels. Clouet's work was published first, therefore he got naming rights to a lot of these mushrooms. Michael Quo called this mushroom Morchella cryptica. Clouet called this mushroom Morchella ulmaria, or the elm morel. But it may be that this mushroom does not favor the elm any more than the classic yellow morel mushroom, Morchella americana. That's the sneaky part of this mushroom. It looks exactly like your classic yellow morel. There's no way to tell them apart, even with a microscope. The only way to tell them apart is by sequencing their DNA. The Cryptic Morel does seem to favor the Great Lakes region. Could be 1 Cryptic Morel for every 5 to 10 true yellow morels in that region, and a lower ratio in other areas, but they do have that classic yellow morel honey-colored cap that starts off gray and then can turn kind of brownish when it dries out. Lighter stem, irregular pits and ridges, and just like the classic yellow morel, these can be found fruiting around dying elm trees and ash trees and in floodplains where sycamores and cottonwood trees grow. There are currently 2 observations for this mushroom on iNaturalist, but because it is indistinguishable from the most common morel mushroom, Morchella americana, there's certainly a lot more of these mushrooms out there. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Now we have Morchella exuberans, the green fire morel, or greenie as it is sometimes called. This morel gets its name from the subtle olive or greenish tint occurring in the pits of the cap when the mushroom is fresh, and from the fact that it is a fire-associated burn morel type species. It can be found fruiting abundantly following a forest fire, growing the first or second spring following the fire. This morel belongs to the Morchella elata, or black morel mushroom clade. It occurs globally and is new to science since 2012. It can be found in the upper regions of North America, California to the Yukon, and in the Midwest and the Northeast US up to Canada. Among some of the striking features of this species are the tiny lollipop-shaped hairs on the ridges of the cap and its distinctive chambered or layered rather than completely hollow stem. It is usually 2 to 5 inches tall, and the ridges are thick and become dark brown to jet black as the mushroom matures. There are currently 5 research-grade observations of this mushroom in the East, 3 in Virginia, and 2 in Quebec. Here we have Morchella rufobrunnea, commonly known as the Blushing Morel or the woodchuck morel, first described in 1998. This is probably the most unique morel mushroom, even more unique than the Morchella tomentosa. So unique it has its own clade as well, section rufobrunnea. DNA studies show that this species is the ancestor to almost all other morel mushrooms. It is often described as a living fossil because it has remained virtually unchanged for millions of years. And rufobrunnea grows in disturbed soils or wood chips used for landscaping, can pretty much grow anywhere. It's always fun to see pictures of these. They can grow in fire pits, on sidewalks, along roadsides, and compost piles, and even in basements sometimes. This fungus may also be able to form facultative tree associations as well as being a decomposer. Fruiting of this mushroom generally occurs in the spring, although it can appear at almost any time of the year. These morels are often conical and can get quite large, 2 to 8 inches, and can have long, leggy stems as they push up and out of organic matter. They have pale ridges and dark gray pits, and as they mature, the whole cap can turn kind of a yellowish tan or honey color. The surface of the fruiting body often bruises brownish orange or pinkish. That's where it gets its name, the Blushing Morel. This happens when it's touched or injured. Morchella rufobrunnea is also one of the morel species that can be cultivated. There are some patented processes that have been developed to grow these mushrooms indoors on trays in a climate-controlled environment. And there are 11 research-grade observations of this mushroom in the eastern United States. Let's move on to the next mushroom. And next we have Morchella septiformis, commonly called the Virginia morel or the tulip tree morel. This is a yellow clade morel that has been new to science since the year 2012. The stem is often heavily mealy or grainy, covered in tiny white or tan granules. The cap is usually ovoid or egg-shaped rather than being perfectly conical, and it is directly attached to the stem without any significant overhang or groove at the junction. Like most yellow morels, its ridges are pale and its pits are darker when young, but they will eventually even out to a uniform tan or yellowish brown. Septiformis is a medium to large morel, 3 to 7 inches tall, and it is endemic to eastern North America, where it has a largely Appalachian distribution and is found most commonly under the American tulip tree, thus the tulip tree morel moniker. There are currently 13 research-grade observations of this mushroom on iNaturalist. Let's move on to the next mushroom. Okay, here we have Morchella importuna, the landscaping black morel, described from North America in 2012, but now this mushroom is found all over the world, likely spread as the result of human activity. Importuna belongs to the black morel clade. It occurs in gardens, wood chip beds, and other urban settings, primarily in Northern California and the Pacific Northwest, but it is also found in the northern parts of the eastern United States and Canada. Much like the blushing morel, it often appears in massive numbers the first spring after new mulch is laid down, then disappears once it has eaten the best nutrients out of the mulch. The fruiting bodies develop a distinct ladder-like pattern in their pits and ridges, and they often have conical, dark-colored caps. A saprobic fungus, Morchella importuna morels grow in wood chips, gardens, fire pits, planters, and almost any disturbed ground in urban areas. There's lots of good pictures of these mushrooms growing in crazy places as well. Morchella importuna may also exhibit mycorrhizal tendencies when grown in an environment with trees, as well as just being a decomposer. And this is another morel species that can be cultivated. There are currently 33 research-grade observations on iNaturalist for this mushroom in the eastern United States and Canada. Morchella diminutiva, the tulip morel. This morel is native to North America and is part of the yellow morel clade. Described as new to science in 2012, it occurs in eastern North America, usually near tulip, poplar, or ash trees, but it is sometimes also found under other hardwood species like hickory, and it is almost always found in mature hardwood forests. This mushroom is known for its tiny stature, typically about the size of your thumb, 1 to 4 inches tall. This is the second smallest of all the morels in the eastern United States, Morchella septentrionalis being the smallest. The cap can be conical or ovoid. The pits are vertically arranged in a similar manner to some black morels, and the cap will turn from grayish to yellowish tan as it ages. The stem is very slender and fragile, and it is often quite long in proportion to the small cap. There are currently 857 research-grade observations for the Morchella diminutiva in the eastern United States on iNaturalist. Next mushroom. Here is Morchella angusticeps, known as the eastern black morel. This is a member of the black morel clade, no surprise there. Formerly called Morchella elata, this mushroom was shown to be genetically distinct from its European cousins. Now the European black morel is called Morchella elata, and angusticeps is angusticeps. That clarification being made in 2012. Morchella angusticeps occurs in association with various hardwoods in the spring. It is consistently the first true morel mushroom to appear, often popping up early to mid-April when the ground temperatures hit 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Morchella angusticeps is generally larger than Morchella septentrionalis, usually 2 to 6 inches tall. The cap is attached to the stem with a small but distinct groove or sinus where it meets the stalk. The vertical ridges are always darker than the pits. When young, the ridges can be tan or brown, but they quickly darken to a deep chocolate brown or charcoal black as they mature. White ash, green ash, and tulip poplar trees are some of its favorite associates, but it can also be found near black cherry and occasionally under white pine trees. There are currently 1,128 research-grade observations for the eastern black morel on iNaturalist. And now we have a very unique morel mushroom, Morchella punctipes, the half-free morel. Sometimes we affectionately call these peckerheads here in Indiana. They're a member of the black morel lineage. They are in the black morel clade, and this is a species that is common in eastern North America. This mushroom being first described in 1903. These mushrooms grow in hardwood forests, often where white ash, American elm, American tulip, maple, and cottonwood trees grow. A true eastern species common in the upper Midwest. Morchella punctipes is a small to medium-sized morel, usually 1 to 4 inches high. The cap is small, conical, and attached to the stem only halfway down its length, hence the half-free morel name. The bottom half of the cap hangs free, and the stem is covered with tiny mealy granules or dots. These are fine white or yellowish bumps on the stem. The ridges are vertical and turn brownish black with age. The pits will remain tan to yellowish. These are a less desirable morel mushroom for consumption as they are often fragile and less substantial than other morel mushroom counterparts. False morels in the genus Verpa, like Verpa bohemica, can appear similar, but they have cottony fibers within their stem, whereas the half-free morel will always have a hollow stem like all true morels do. There are 1,809 research-grade observations of this mushroom on iNaturalist in the eastern United States. And finally, the most abundant morel mushroom in eastern North America, Morchella americana, the American yellow morel mushroom. This is the quintessential yellow morel of North America. For many years it was called Morchella esculenta, but DNA testing has shown that the American yellow morel is distinct from the European variety, so now the European yellow morel is called Morchella esculenta, and the American is called Morchella americana. These are often quite large yellow mushrooms, 1 to 8 inches tall. I've even seen them larger than that. They can have a cone-shaped or rounded top. They have that classic irregular honeycomb-like network of ridged openings on the cap. The cap is fused to the stem, and it starts off gray in color until the mushroom releases its spores. Then the mushroom will turn a yellow honey color, and once it gets really old, it can kind of dry out and turn brown in the cap. These mushrooms can be found in every state of the contiguous United States except for Florida and in Canada, though they are more common east of the Rocky Mountains. They are known for fruiting quite liberally, especially around dying elm trees, and they can also be found in floodplains among sycamores, tulip poplars, and cottonwood trees, and more rarely they have been found to fruit among other hardwood trees such as maples and hickories. A very common mushroom. There are 7,186 research-grade observations of this mushroom throughout North America and Canada. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Mushroom Journeys. I'm Michael File. I'll see you next time.